All right, welcome everybody to an episode of Soccer Over There. I just say an episode and not my usual. It's going to be a great episode or awesome episode, simply because this is going to be a little bit different from our normal broadcast. We're not really going to do a whole bunch of recaps over the weekend and this is what happened and all that. There will be hot drops and other commentary on such things. But a news report dropped from Der Spiegel, courtesy of Football Leaks. And in case you were saying, well, Football Leaks doesn't that, WikiLeaks, what's what? Football Leaks is the group that hacked and got a hold of the rape complaint against Cristiano Ronaldo. And in case you were wondering about the veracity of these documents, they are also the ones who breached the tax haven tax shelters that people in Spain were using to bypass their insane tax code. And it led to charges being brought against Ronaldo and Messi and Jose Mourinho, in which they all ended up with the same suspended jail sentence. So I will let you form your own opinions on what we are about to report, but I am simply going off of what my digging has found. And this goes back to the Super League that has been kicked around over the past couple of days. Essentially, the way that it works is that 11 of Europe's largest clubs have plotted to completely shatter the European soccer model by breaking away from their national leagues and to form an entirely new league. No UEFA, no FIFA, just them. The teams involved would be Real Madrid, Arsenal, AC Milan, Barcelona, Bayern Munich, Juventus, Manchester United, Chelsea, Liverpool, Man City, and Paris Saint-Germain. Those are what will be called the founding members or the founders, okay? So now we have that term down. So anytime you hear me talk about the founders, those are the teams that I'm talking about. They would have 5 guest teams. Now, the term guest has not really been broken out. The way that it looks, I'll get to later on in our show, but this looks like they will be a slightly rotating cast of characters. Like if you have a favorite sitcom and one of your favorite characters has a recurring girlfriend who shows up every now and then one day drops off the face of the earth, never to come back, that's essentially the category that I would put these 5 teams into, and that would be Atletico Madrid, Borussia Dortmund, Inter Milan, Marseille, and Roma. Now, how did this come about? Well, before we even get to the how, let's get to the why. In 1992, the Premier League showed that when the big clubs flex their financial muscles, they can dictate terms, right? UEFA and FIFA have been bending while still trying to vacuum up as much money as humanly possible. Champions League expanded. FIFA's in talks with a SoftBank to start a new Club World Cup, which could go either every 4 years or even every year. Okay? The new dynamic is that if the big brand clubs show up, the money will follow. And that's exactly what they are. I mean, these are big brand clubs. When you're talking about, Chelsea and Man United and even Arsenal, even though they've been down on their luck, and even AC Milan, which is my team, which has been, they've been out in soccer success wilderness on a walkabout. They're still global brands. They're still icons. When they show up to town, people will come and knock off uniforms and they will cheer and scream and go nuts. And look no further than the MLS All-Star game here in Atlanta, where Juve came, bunkered and countered in front of about 70,000 people. Now, how long does it take? Does Juve, Milan, Inter, Roma, these teams, when you think about it, how long do they have to support Parma and Frosinone and Sassuolo, right? Did Napoli cause ESPN to gobble up the Serie A viewing rights? No. Does the casual fan race to the TV to watch Schalke versus Mainz? No. What about Hanover versus Werder? No. What about the Champions League? Guys, John and Jason, are you guys really racing to the TV or bookmarking when Schalke versus Galatasaray is on the TV?
I am not. And
No?
I guess that makes me not as cool and maybe not a soccer hipster. But
No?
No, I mean, I haven't gotten the Bleacher Report Live app. I subscribe to other stuff. I haven't needed it. I haven't gone down that road yet. I don't. When I have a chance to pick up a random game, sure, I'll watch a random game on Serie A on ESPN Plus. It's very accessible. It's good. I'll watch a random game from England when it's on, like this afternoon, Fulham and Huddersfield. It was on. I wasn't doing anything. I was just catching up. Okay, it's on. Cool. I'm not rushing to the TV or the bar to watch those games. Just not.
John, what about Porto versus Lokomotiv Moscow? You watching that one?
He might be stunned by that.
He might be stunned. I'm going to go ahead and say I'm going to guess that John is probably not watching that one. So if you look at these teams, how long do they have to float these smaller sides, whether it's their domestic league or whether it's Champions League? There's still a large piece of the pie that has to go to these smaller clubs to make them whole. And if you're Juve, Milan, Inter, Roma, or Real Madrid and Barcelona, I mean, just look at that. Look at La Liga. Where is that league without the two of them? I mean, let's look at the NFL, for example, right? They made $8 billion in 2017. That's $255 million per team, okay? Now, that's not just the Patriots or Philadelphia, right? Philadelphia won the Super Bowl. Oh, you get all this money. Have a great day. No. Even the Cleveland Browns got $255 million for participating in the NFL. I think we can all agree that of every team out there, if we had a pro-rel system in the NFL, that Alabama would be promoted and Cleveland would be relegated back down to college football. Right? I don't think that's going on any sort of like insane branch to say that, right? It's not up on a limb. It's pretty accurate. Now, here are some things that we need to talk about for this Super League, right? Because it gets into this. The teams want more money. That's not a secret, and nor is it kind of some shifty, evil thing for teams to want more money. These are global brands, global organizations. They are driven to succeed, right? Jason, one of my favorite movies is Scarface, and one of my favorite characters is Frank, right? Who gets Tony into the cocaine business, shows him the ropes, and one night he tells Tony, never underestimate the other guy's greed, right? It's a great scene. And Robert Loggia just eats the scene alive, right? But with that whole line. But he's right. Frank is right. Never underestimate the other guy's greed. And when they talk about breaking away, Jay Riddle asked, is this even something that's sustainable, right? And Jay, that's a great question. And in order to answer this, we have to go and drop in a couple of qualifiers here, because I'm going to compare the two, the NFL and this new Super League, because it's not terribly far off, right? The NFL has a 17-week season, 16 games each team plays, right? They get a bye week. There is no pro-rel. So far, everybody's like rolling their eyes. Yes, Nick, we know, right? The Super Bowl averages roughly 100 million viewers, and that's from 538.com. The average audience for an NFL game was about 14.9 million in 2017. That's from Business Insider. Conservative estimates put per game EPL viewership at 12 million per game. Okay. Now, obviously, that's going to change depending on who's playing, but that's a rough estimate. 10 games per round equal about 120 million people watching Premier League each season, or each weekend, excuse me. Now, when we look at this, the NFL had $2.8 billion in payouts, right? The Champions League, $2.8 billion in payouts. And that was that's the projected payouts for 2018, 2019. Jason, that's a pretty good chunk of change, is it not?
It's a lot of money.
Yeah. 1.56 billion was in 2017, 2018, and it flatlined from 2016 to 2017. Real Madrid got 102 million for winning Champions League. Now go back and realize that Real Madrid, one of the best soccer teams on the planet last year, right? 102 million for winning Champions League. How long is Champions League again? Long time.
Correct.
Right? Yeah. Cleveland Browns got $225 million for sleepwalking through a 16-game season. If you're a big team in Europe and you're looking at that math and you're like, wait a minute. We have more viewers. We have a larger global appeal than the NFL. You can touch foot in any country around the world and you will see a Real Madrid jersey in probably about 3 hours, guaranteed. Probably about 10 minutes on a good day. What are we doing wrong? And if you're one of these Super League clubs, you have to look at outside of Porto in 2003, 2004, and Ajax in 94, 95. Every other Champions League winner has been a quote unquote Super League participant since 1993.
This keeps getting more interesting.
All right. When you consider the facts, the money's there, the investment is there, right? Obviously, there's going to be problems. And this is where we start getting into some of the stickier side of this potential Super League. So we got into why. It's more money. Screw fan experience. We don't care if you like Juve versus Spal, okay? We don't care about that. No, oops, out the door with it. Or Barcelona versus Girona. We don't care. You're out the door. Have a great day. Chelsea versus Huddersfield in the FA Cup. That sounds great, right? No, thanks. Have a great day. The problem will be the upheaval of the traditional rivalries and the financial viability of the leagues without the quote-unquote big teams, right? England would be fine. It would be odd, but it would be fine. The league would live on. The FA Cup would probably be, and this is guessing. Jason, please correct me if I'm out of line here, or if John is out there floating around. Feel free to join in as well. I think the FA Cup would probably be the concession point, that if Chelsea, Man U, Arsenal, Man City walked away, that they would still have to compete in the FA Cup as an exchange, along with some very, very generous parachute payments. I think Germany would thrive. There's more than enough regulation from the government to ensure that the teams are financially viable top to bottom anyway. But here's the catch for Germany. Should Bayern Munich or Dortmund join this little operation? In Germany, you don't just sign a contract with Bayern Munich or Dortmund. You also sign exclusively with the Bundesliga, which means that the players could say, no Dortmund, no Bayern, we're leaving you, and they could leave for any other Bundesliga team they wanted, transfer free. Now, according to the football leagues, this was kicked around by Bayern's legal team, and the head honchos at Bayern were okay with this. The whole read is on Der Spiegel. If you want to go and do a deep dive, it's on Der Spiegel. It's absolutely insane reporting. Italy would crumble. I have no problem saying that. Without the financial injection of Juventus, the commercial appeal of Milan, even in a dilapidated state, Inter and Roma, there's no international TV deal. The ESPN Plus would drop that deal faster than they would know what to do with.
I don't know about that. They have Sweden.
Well, they have Sweden, but do you think you would get near as much Serie A coverage? How much coverage does Sweden exactly get?
Well, that's the thing, is like they'd be on there, but the amount of money that Serie A is getting from an ESPN for those rights would dramatically diminish. Absolutely.
So, and this is my guess here based on what we've seen so far with the revenues from previous years where, one or two teams go bankrupt. Typically the bottom three that get relegated. The league would continue, but I'm guessing that half the teams in Serie A would go bankrupt after 2 years if this happened. If you lost that commercial pull of Juve, Milan, Inter, and Roma. Financially, the league is just in bad shape. And they would have to almost do a ground-up rebuild, which probably wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. But I saw in doing my research, I was doing a deep dive on the Elliott Fund, who owns Milan, and someone who did business with them compared them to the army ants in certain parts of the developing world, where they come in and the villagers will try to leave, right? They try to escape, and sickly animals, sickly people who can't get out of the way they're just devoured, gone. But when it's done and over with, the villagers all claim that the diseases drop off, that, the food, it's essentially walking Thanos, right? Snap your fingers, half the population of the universe vanishes. It's the same thing, right? I imagine that this would be sort of that kind of insane reset for Serie A. Jason, correct me if I'm wrong. I think Spain and France probably wouldn't be too terribly far behind that.
I think almost everybody would be in the same boat, and we'll kind of transition it to what it looks like for the smaller teams, because I think there's two different conversations here. If you look at France, Spain, Italy, Germany, let's just take all of them as a group. Okay, so in Italy, who would be the biggest team remaining? What are you looking at? Napoli. That'd be the one that's left. That's like, hey guys, don't forget about me. Germany, you've got a few, of that ilk. France, not much. Spain, your Valencias, Sevillas. It'd be like, hey, we're still over here. We're cool. England, you'd have quite a few that are big clubs, but not super clubs. And there is a difference. And that's the thing, is when you look at this from the super club's perspective, totally get it. It makes sense. Why do you want to diminish how much money you can make to help out a Wolverhampton, or to help out, a Hertha Berlin, or to help out Spal, or to help out, Vallecano? I mean, keep going. If you're a super club and you have that opportunity to be a super club, why do you want to help out the little guy? Other than that's the way it's always been. I understand it from the super club perspective. The smaller clubs, does it dramatically change their world if they're not playing league matches against these teams? It does. It would hurt the leagues that actually do share TV money. It would hurt because you wouldn't get a cut of that. Beyond that, how much of an effect is it? Maybe not a ton. It's those big clubs that aren't super clubs that I think are the ones who are going to be hurt the most. And they're the ones who are going to fight, because they run the risk of, if they don't get into something like this, if there's not a super league and a not quite so super league below it, then they're going to get left behind, and they're going to fall into that next level of just an everyday club. That's a tough spot for those clubs that aren't quite big enough to be super clubs. That's where it gets interesting to me. I understand the conversation, and I've said for years that all the talk about pro rel and this is what you have to do because it's what everybody does. I've always thought that the world was going to come around to more of the NFL model than the United States going to a completely open promotion relegation model, because there are a lot of risks and negatives associated with that. It's a wonderful story. It creates dramatic situations. It's not great for business. From a long-term perspective, it's just not great for business. Don't give me the line that you can buy a small team and make them a super team just because they're good at the sport. If that was the case, you would see it happen. It doesn't. It doesn't. Mega millionaires today are not buying some small random club to try to make them big. There's been a couple of those that have gotten great traction and are bigger than they were, but they're not a mega club. None of those clubs you listed, Nick, none of those clubs that would be in this are clubs like that. These are historically super clubs. That's who they are. That's what they are. You can step up and have a good year. You can move up some levels. You can do that. But if you are a billionaire and you are looking to buy a super club, you're just going to buy a super club. You might buy one of those clubs that's right there close and make them have that small jump to be a super club. You're not going to go buy a club in the third division and pump a bunch of money into them and raise them up out of nowhere. It doesn't happen. So you're in this situation where I get it from the super club perspective. The smaller clubs, it'll be a different world, but it's a world they can survive in. It's those big clubs that I worry about that are going to have the biggest impact on what their day-to-day is like. So it's a radical thing. I don't know if you're going to be able to get past the history and tradition to make it happen without a whole bunch of strife, or the Super League is going to have to kick money back into these domestic leagues and have their clubs participate in national cups. You're going to have to find a way to make it work where the clubs that have a vested interest in it, those mid-table, those upper-table, not quite super clubs, get something out of it. They're going to have to get something out of it, or they'll never go along with it, and it's going to be just absolute chaos.
Well, according to Dortmund, they were asked by Der Spiegel, and they said, we will not leave the Bundesliga, but, quote, we are keeping our options open.
You have to.
I mean, it's bad business if you just dismiss something like this out of hand. And a friend of mine is a native of Germany, and he said he wouldn't watch, and he's a huge Bayern Munich fan. But you have to keep in mind that if you talk to a lot of ad executives, what they say about this generation coming up is that they're not tied to convention, right? Like the brand loyalty just isn't there. Mom had a Buick, dad had a Buick. Your kid's not buying a Buick, right? They've moved on to different things. Now, they may love a team, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they love when Dortmund plays Hertha. They don't care about Hertha. When they play FIFA 19, I highly doubt they're teeing up that, the Dortmund versus Schalke game. But maybe they do the whole Bundesliga season on FIFA, but they're probably doing their own little version of a Super League where, they play as Dortmund and their friend plays as Real Madrid. And can you imagine a league where it's nothing but that? And I think if you're the architects of this, that's something that has to factor in. You have to appeal to that next audience. You have to go where the buzz is and the spectacle. And the NFL, say what you want, is spectacle, right? I mean, as for all of the problems the NFL has, for as many former football players as we see in wheelchairs and walkers, and they're with CTE and how they end up getting tied with ALS and all that, they still pack out the house every Sunday, Jason.
Yeah, that's a different situation, though, and I think that'll change over time when you have more kids not growing up playing football. It'll be a different conversation decades down the road. I think the world's just changed. I mean, when you look at it back in the 50s, if you were born in a certain neighborhood, you were a fan of your neighborhood club or your dad's club or your granddad's club. That was who you were a fan of. That was it. Now, if you're a fan or you've grown up as a fan or you live next to, I don't know, Cambridge United, and it's like, oh, this is nice. This is very quaint. This is nice. I like it. This is fun. I'm going to go to the Cambridge United game. Oh, but man, the Clasico is on. I'm going to go watch Real Madrid and Barcelona because, I mean, it's Real Madrid and Barcelona. Oh, I really like Barcelona. I like Lionel Messi. I'm a fan. That's my other team. That's my team. But yeah, I'll go see Cambridge United when I can, when it matches up with my schedule. Yeah, I'll go do that. That's nice. That's what it kind of turns into because you have a chance to watch the biggest clubs in the world on a regular basis. The world's a lot smaller than it used to be. So it's just a different situation all around. I want to get John's perspective on this. John's with us now. And, somebody who's kind of followed the plight of some of the smaller clubs who went through that financial downturn side of it and have tried to bounce back. Their effects or their, after effects of something like this, I think is completely different than what the super clubs would benefit from and what your, Sevillas and Napolis and clubs of that ilk would go through with this. I think, I'd like to know what John thinks the effects of this would be on a Portsmouth or on a Wimbledon and clubs like that.
Well, I mean, when you're looking at those lower divisions and you've seen what has happened to a Portsmouth when you go into administration, when you have the team that used to be in Wimbledon that is now, bouncing back and forth between, third division, fourth division. And some years they'll be in League Two and they'll be in League One or what have you. Then it's just a matter of understanding your own economic sensibilities and figuring out, okay, we've taken this long road to get back to here. We can't overextend ourselves again, and it's a lesson that's learned by that. But the more that the two of you were talking, the more that it was almost like when college football created the CFA. And you had the super clubs, for lack of a better word, all of the larger named athletic programs strike out and create their own television deal with ABC. So you were always going to see a Texas, you were always going to see an Oklahoma, a Nebraska, an Alabama. And that's what this strikes me of more than anything else. And there's talk about college football doing it again. And then what that does is it creates a bit of a trickle down for those other Power 5 schools who aren't the superpowers. And then that in turn creates an issue for the Group of Five or the Go 5 schools. And that the financial implication is going to be that the television contract or the media contract these days is going to stick with the Super Club. And you're going to have all of the other schools that aren't a part of the Super League fighting for the scraps. And I think that you're creating a dangerous situation for teams who are going to want to try to overextend themselves, puff out their chest and sit there and say, even though they're not a super club, well, we're an extra large club or we're a large club. We're an extra large club. We can handle this. And then they overextend, overspend, and then they don't. I think it's dangerous for those teams and those owners whose eyes get really big in this situation, think that there's a power vacuum there, try to fill it and fill it poorly. And I think that that's what I'm looking at when the big names leave the table, what scraps are there and how many cats are there chasing after the chicken bones.
Well, in my mind, I have to present the counterpoint here. And first of all, I want to give a shout out to Michael Ruiz, who's listening right now. Thank you for listening. He said it's a great discussion. I appreciate it. Really glad you're joining us, man. Brandon is yelling at me because I say Paris Saint-Germain as opposed to Paris Saint-Germain. And I'm not changing that. So I know you lived in Europe, man.
Until they get out of the group stage, they're Paris Saint-Germain.
That's right. You must earn the Germain. So, and he was asking about Schalke versus Mainz. When did that happen? I was referencing the Bundesliga right there. So it was just a Bundesliga only, not a Champions League match. But anyway, my counterpoint to this is, shouldn't we be okay with the clearing of the field and get these billionaires out? Just let them go and do their own thing, take their toys, go to their own sandboxes, and let the excitement of these clubs that aren't just going to criminally outspend each other have at it. Let financial fair play work for them, and maybe actually make it so it's a functional system and not one that's just worked over by the elites. and instead make it so there is some sort of soft salary cap where you say you can't exceed certain expenses on player purchases and acquisitions.
That rule will never be circumvented.
Never in life. Well, we'll get to why that's happening, by the way. That's also a part of this. So, but I just think that it's time. Let the billionaires go and do their thing. Let the Alabamas of the world no longer beat up on the FCS schools, and let them go and play in their Power 5 games and have fun. But I think they should be parachute payments delivered to these leagues to make sure that they don't completely go under. And I think that it would actually be a good opportunity for Spain and Italy and France maybe to sit down and reorganize their leagues in a way that actually makes sense and refashion some of those television deals so that way, the clubs can be, made whole. And this is the difference between this and why I keep going back to the NFL is because it's a very NFL type model where there's guaranteed. But
there are no lower divisions for the NFL unless you're including something like the AAF or something like that. It's the NFL in their monopoly, and that is it.
Yes, and if you're a club, if you're the Cleveland Browns and you make $255 million, you're A-okay with that. And if you are one of these teams and you're going to be in this for 10 years, or 20 years, you're guaranteed 20 years in the Super League. You cannot be relegated for 20 years if you're one of a founding member. That has to make a lot of sense to you if you're a Real Madrid. Why should I?
But back home, you weren't going to get relegated anyway.
That's not the issue. That has zero to do with the issue. The being relegated part, that doesn't affect a Real Madrid. No. Has a major club been relegated before? Yeah, it happens very, very, very rarely. But that's not part of your business plan. The problem for a Real Madrid, when you look at this opportunity, because that's what it is right now, is instead of playing games against small teams that do nothing for your bottom line and you're helping them, you would only be playing big games. You would be bringing in more money in TV. You'd be bringing in more money in shirts. You'd be exposed to a bigger brand. You'd elevate yourself. You would not have to worry about a Vallecano or Valladolid or whoever else.
Las Palmas.
Because they don't matter to you. They don't matter to Real Madrid right now. They just have to play them because of a league. They would rather play only games against big teams. Being relegated isn't a fear. Now, what you said, Nick, is interesting that, okay, these clubs would not be relegated for 20 years in the Super League. That means the whoever is founding the Super League and the plans behind it have that idea that, hey, you know what? This is how we would grow. We'd keep adding teams. We would expand. What do American sports leagues do? They expand. They add more teams. Those teams have to pay to come in. That's more money. Everything keeps growing. It's been a different model as professional sports developed in the United States compared to how professional sports developed in other countries. It's a different model. It's hard to say that it's been a bad model for the National Football League, for the National Basketball Association, for Major League Baseball to operate in the way they have. It's just different than the way the rest of the world has operated professional sports.
Well, one thing is that there has to be some element of relegation, or else it violates the European competition law. So the idea, and this is from a set of documents that football leagues released, where they ended up on Real Madrid's desk, and this is after the super teams essentially found an agreement with UEFA that said, hey, we're not going to break away. We're going to keep doing Champions League, but you're going to have to pay us a lot more money. And we're going to have essentially a tradition clause added in, which is the teams that have been more successful over Champions League get extra money out of the deal because they're coming to watch us anyway. I don't think you're terribly wrong. But what this would cause is a creation of a second, as you said earlier, Jason, a not-so Super League. And those teams would play the guests, and only the guests, to see who would be included in the next, I guess, on the next guest list for the Super League.
So essentially, you're just creating a very convoluted way to try to make it work for UEFA.
It's not even making it work for UEFA. In this model, UEFA still goes away. It doesn't go away. It's not included in this, but the plans are based off of EuroLeague basketball. So that's the only way.
There you go. Okay.
That's how they were able to make it work. And when they were talking about having this deal with UEFA agreed to certain things, but this is what the super teams wanted. They would stay in Champions League, but only with 24 teams, and there would be spots allocated for teams that have been historically successful, which I have on my own nicknamed the Milan Clause. So that was rejected. Clubs organize and control competition with UEFA, also rejected. The tradition clause was included. And get this, Bayern Munich gets a $30 million payday before they even kick a ball in Champions League. Next year. How about that? So again, it's all about the money, right? But it gets worse because 4 of the top club representatives will occupy 4 director spots in joint company with UEFA. They will have oversight on TV deals, sponsorship, admin and organizational and operational costs. In other words, they're going to learn how to run a league courtesy of UEFA.
This has street fight written all over it.
Yep. And so UEFA thought everything was dead and gone, that the Super League was finished until October 22nd when Real Madrid gets a draft of an agreement of the 16 from key capital partners based in Madrid. It's a binding term sheet. Champions League dies in 2021. The Super League would be born. 16 teams, 11 founders, 5 guests, 20 years guaranteed for the founders. Locked in. We've already discussed that. It would consist of a group round, a knockout round. Does that sound like anything else that we know of? Where it's group play and then knockout. Sounds a lot like
I've heard of
MLS.
this.
Yeah,
So
sounds like a
now,
playoff.
let
Right?
me ask this. This sounds a little different than EuroLeague basketball and what's been previously bandied around about a Super League. This would function more like a Champions League and not a Super League that would be separate from domestic competition. It sounds more like a Champions League.
It's like a Champions League, but they're not. But there would be no more. They would break away. They're still legally. The issue right now is they're still trying to legally find ways to get other teams out of their leagues. Germany will be the most problematic because of the intense regulation that surrounds each of the clubs to prevent what's happening in Italy and all that. Italy, when Juve decides to break away, there's really nothing that can be done outside of a mass riot in the streets, which might happen anyway. But you're looking at the original plan for this started back with Charlie Stilitano. It may be a name that if you listen to Sirius XM, that his name is, he does a football show on Sirius XM. He is the godfather of world soccer. He knows everyone. And if Charlie speaks it, it's law. And he presented a plan. And he's also the guy who did the World Football Challenge and the International Champions Cup. But with the International Champions Cup, he worked with Stephen Ross and Relevant Sports. If you remember, there was a story not too long ago about how Relevant Sports and Charlie Stilitano were trying to bring La Liga soccer to Miami. And FIFA shot it down, right? Not UEFA, FIFA. So even FIFA's aware of the gaining power that Stilitano has, right? And it all stems from 2015 when Stilitano presented a plan that he claimed would net each of these super clubs $500 million each. A 34-week season, 18 teams. That was the original plan. Now, obviously, that has changed. That it's been kicked around. And then this original plan that has been kicked around and subsequent variations thereof, leaks from Bayern's legal team said that Bayern was very much on board with this. And they also asked about not having to release their players for international duty if they were part of this. So you're looking at a breakaway, not just from UEFA, but possibly even FIFA itself. That their legal team said, hey, look, this would be a bad look if we tried to ban our players from leaving for international duty, because that is an opportunity for them to market themselves and bring prestige to the club as well. So we probably shouldn't do that. Of everyone who has asked me anything about this, that's the one question that I get the most is, would they be able to ban players from not going to their national team? I don't see that happening, but it's been kicked around and it's freaking people out. I'm sure it's freaking FIFA out. And not to mention that if you have the Super League, what happens to the Club World Cup, which FIFA is really trying to grow and develop? So now you have UEFA and FIFA freaking out, and the clubs are sitting back and plotting. And The idea, and for the guests, is that they would have control, the Super League, right? And this is where the problem is. They could go and they could cherry pick from a market where they need a pop in viewership, right? So if they say, well, out of these guest teams, we have a lot of Spanish and Italian teams, but now we need a bigger hit in Turkey, right? So let's go get Galatasaray, or let's go, to Switzerland and get Young Boys or something like that. Let's go get Ajax, or the option would be there, but it's freaking these other leagues out as well. But legally, there's so much to be done that if you're looking at a start date of 2021, which is what the plan is right now, it leaves you with only two options: evolution or revolution. And Der Spiegel did a good job of breaking this down, right? So revolution is obviously breakaway form Super League. Evolution would be that UEFA forms a third superior competition to Champions League, which would just consist of these super teams. Now, I don't know what that would even do to Champions League at that point, but guys, the more I look at this, the more I look at the numbers and how everything breaks down and viewership and how much money a league like the NFL gets. And even if you go to college football and you go based off the college football model, John, the money that's there for a group like this Super League, it makes so much sense to me for them just to go and do it. Just pick up and go. Get the bags packed, load it up, and get out of Dodge and do your deal. But do not expect, and I think, John, you nailed it, it's going to be a street fight. It's going to be a street fight on the way out the door, because there's no way in the world Germany's just going to say, okay, green light, have at it. I highly doubt that Spain would be so keen to go and keep hiding all of the tax loopholes and everything that Real Madrid and Barcelona have been using for all those years. I'm sure the tax man would come kicking in the door like the LAPD gang unit. But this, to me, I think it's going to happen. It's going to be interesting when it does. But one way or the other, come 2021, the landscape will change. And I just don't know if this is going to be the best thing for Italy or Spain or France. But from a viewer standpoint, you're talking about a regular season of nothing but heavy hitters, no financial fair play, going out buying any player you want. I mean, it's essentially it's ultimate team in real life. That's exactly what you're looking at. Guys, your thoughts?
I still think that there are too many large egos in the room, and a lot of them might trip over each other in the creation of this. I'm not as optimistic as you are when it comes to a 2021 date. I just think that when big boys with big boy toys all get into a room and they want to try to, figure out who they are around the table, and all they do is loosen up their belt and just, unzip their flies and try to figure it all out. You know that some folks are, I just still think that there are too many egos involved in the whole process, and it's not going to be as cut and dried as you think it might be.
It won't be cut and dried, but I think it happens. Yeah. I think there's too much money for it not to happen. And I mean, it's just that whole thing that Nick talked about the world is different. People aren't tied down to old conventions. The whole idea of, well, it's always been this way and you have to protect your local club and all that. I think there's going to be kind of two separate things. I'm curious to see how they bridge the gap between these clubs leaving their domestic leagues. And that's what I wonder. I really think the first step is going to be much more of a Champions League or whatever you're going to call it, but
want me to drive you upstairs?
A third trophy. I think that's what you're going to see, where it's a bigger deal then the Champions League. The Champions League becomes the Europa League. The Europa League becomes something different. I think you're going to see that happen first. Then over time, you might see a bigger, true long season, forgetting the domestic league and a true breakaway. But I think it takes a lot of time for that to happen.
Well, I like to go into why I think this is going to be different than other things kicked around. When you look at the teams that are involved, there's more American ownership now than ever in big-time world soccer. So look at Arsenal, Stan Kroenke, right? AC Milan, people have asked why is AC Milan involved in this, especially with their lack of success over like the past decade. The Elliott Fund runs them, and that's Paul Singer, who has been called, quote, one of the toughest money managers out there, right? And that's from Bloomberg. And he's the guy who, when Argentina was having intense economic issues and their debts were being called in, he was the one calling in the debt. He has a gift for identifying economically weak situations and companies and organizations, buying them and flipping them, which is why he was able to get a hold of Milan. He cashed it in at the right time, repoed it, and which is why I think they're involved in this, because with Singer, you have immediate global financial legitimacy because he's one of the toughest, most litigious hedge fund managers out there. And then you see Manchester United, owned by the Glazer family. Liverpool, right? Fenway Sports Group. And then you have the oil money of City, Paris Saint-Germain, Chelsea. Juventus, to me, out of all of these, is probably the most financially unstable one. And I think they could run into more issues with Fiat and Exor than they could anything else. I just don't know if they have the money to be able to make that happen. But to me, even now the guest team, right? Roma, right? Jim Pilata, who was an offshoot from what we call the Massachusetts Soccer Mafia. Those guys, when all of this sounds very Americanized, right? Like the very almost as closed as you can get for European standards. The amount of money that's being kicked around, that idea that you keep a closed system and you keep all of the money yourselves and not have to farm it out to UEFA or FIFA or some runt club team that can never get their act together. They can't balance the checkbook. They can barely have running water in their stadium facilities, and I'm supposed to keep them afloat. Why? Well, you get Americans in there and they say, hey, look, even the Browns are making money. We can all make money here if we keep it closed, if we keep it just us and make it so incredibly difficult to get into this group that, we can cherry pick who we want, which would be the most financially stable, globally recognized of the lack of a better term B team. That's why I think it's different. There's a lot of money involved in this and people who have global power. And when you're talking about Charlie Stilitano, he knows all the buttons to push. And I
think it'll be a process to get here, though. And I think that's the thing, is I don't think it happens overnight where it's like, all right, Manchester United is no longer part of the Premier League. They are just playing in this, and that's it. I think it'll be gradual steps because UEFA won't want to lose the money from these teams. They won't want to lose these teams. The national federations won't want to lose these clubs completely. They will break away, but it'll be over time. And I think it will start with a protected Champions League setup.
But Jason, you're talking about they have to give a tremendous amount of their money to FIFA or to UEFA, excuse me, to UEFA for setting this stuff up from an infrastructure.
But this is what's going to happen. So, this is the way it's going to go is you're going to work towards, okay, UEFA, this is what you want for us to be able to do this. Well, we're going to give you X, you're going to give us Y, and this is how we're going to start. And then over time, these are the clubs that drive the game. Like it or not, and we can have the argument all day that no, it's the grassroots side, no, it's the small clubs that are the lifeblood of the game, no, it's this, no, it's that. Look, these are the big clubs that are driving the money in the game. So that's what the people are worried about. That's what UEFA's worried about. That's what the national leagues are worried about. That's the issue here. So you're going to have compromises. You're going to have compromises along the way. UEFA will say, okay, you guys don't want to be relegated from the Champions League. You don't want to miss out in the Champions League because you're the big boys. Okay, now you want your own league? Okay, give us some money. Okay, we'll make it work. Handshake deal, yada, yada, yada. It's going to take time because UEFA and the domestic leagues won't let these clubs just walk away straight away. They will concede things to them because they do have value to UEFA and the domestic leagues. It'll be a process over time in the breaking away.
Well, I disagree from your point on this. I think that they're tired of paying UEFA, and I think they're tired of financial fair play.
But they can't just walk. That's the thing, is they can't just say, you know what, we're out completely, because that is too risky for them at this point. You know, I mean, what are you going to do? It's too unknown right now, I think, is the thing.
To me, there's too much money involved to not. This looks to be, to me, a shot across the bow.
Of course, it is. No, it absolutely is.
Where they're like,
but you can't just cut the cord, though. That's the thing. You can't just pull the ripcord on the parachute and head over to the next thing.
No.
Let's say Milan says, you know what, we're out. Screw it. Forget Italy. Forget Serie A. Forget the Italian national team. We don't care. We're going to be our own thing. We're going to go do tours. We're going to do whatever we want to do. And we're going to play in this whatever Euro League. Okay. Then FIFA says, well, no, your players are not going to play for national teams, and your players are banned, and your players are outlaws. We've went down this road before in different leagues. The United States has had an outlaw league, and it didn't work. And a year later, they said, yeah, this doesn't work. We're not going to do this. It's not worth it. Now, this is a different situation. The money's completely different. But the big clubs are not going to risk the paydays that they have now to chase more and just walk away for the unknown. That's why I think it's going to be a process to get here, and FIFA and UEFA are going to have to give in, as they already have. They're going to have to give in even more because these clubs have incredible leverage, and this is that shot across the bow for the big clubs to get what they want going forward.
Yeah, I agree with you guys in that it's not going to be instantaneous, which is why, you know, I think a 2021 start date is also ambitious at best, but by 2025, I think it's done, and I think it's going to be. But the regulators, yes, for England will be problematic. The German regulators will be damn near impossible.
And that's the thing, is if you get, say, England, the English clubs can't do it for whatever reason, they can't pull it, or the German clubs can't, you start getting cracks, then it's not going to work, because you're not going to do it with just Barca, Real Madrid, Milan, PSG. You got to have more than that. So you're not going to drop down to, okay, well, we'll have Sevilla instead of Chelsea. That's where it starts to get tricky. That's why I think there is going to be building blocks to it. But this is where those big clubs want to be. This is where they want to go. And that's absolutely 100% clear now, if it wasn't before.
Yeah.
How do they get there, and how long does it take to get there is going to be the question.
Well, I'll put my bets on 2025. That's my
2025 for them to be completely broken away and not play in their domestic league.
There's too many billionaires in this room. There's too many billionaires. They could fund this on their own. And if Stephen Ross and Relevant Sports get behind it as either the marketing muscle and or the group who helps broker these deals, I think it can be done prior to that. But that's why all the legal departments of Bayern and Real Madrid and Barcelona are getting involved in it. I honestly, you guys, we keep talking about the regulators for England and Germany. I still think it's the tax man for Spain that's going to be the linchpin for all of this. Because if all Footy Leaks has to do is essentially drop that, here's where they're hiding the money, and the tax man comes and says, okay, look, we can either shut your clubs down or you can, we'll make some backroom deal where you stay in La Liga. But I mean, Brandon B keeps texting me, says revamp the damn Champions League with bigger purses. Yeah, I think that can be done, but there's only so much money in that pie, and you have to have solidarity payments for the Pilsens of the world and the AEKs and.
But no, and see, this is what I'm saying. This is what the big clubs are going to do first. By 2025, is there a new trophy that is competed for just like the Champions League that is only these clubs? I could absolutely buy into that. Where you're not giving solidarity payments, you're not doing any of that. It's its own competition. The big clubs run it. It's the Euro Super League, whatever you want to call it. But it is like the Champions League in terms of the calendar. The clubs play domestically. They compete for this midweek. You've got your primetime games, but it's not with your Pilsens and Basel and any of them. It's just the big powers. It's just the big boys. I could see that by 2025, absolutely. And I think that's the first step for this.
Well, it has been a lively conversation on this. This is something that's going to be kicking around for a while, so I don't want anybody to feel like this is the last we're going to talk about it because hot drop. But yes, I thought this was going to be too big for a hot drop, and after the full dropping of Footy Leaks and Der Spiegel, I was like, yeah, we're dedicating a show to this. So just keep in mind that this is something that's not going to be happening tomorrow. Your favorite players will still be able to play for FIFA in FIFA tournaments. It's not going away. FIFA will still find ways to rob you.
That's what they do best.
Yeah, it's what they do best. That's one of the reasons I'm okay with it, because if it means the dramatic weakening of FIFA and or UEFA, I'm the enemy of my enemy, I suppose. But
FIFA will protect its World Cup. I think that's the weakness, is they will protect their World Cup and they'll give to a certain point, but they'll protect their World Cup.
Yeah. The World Cup is not going anywhere. If anything, the Club World Cup would be the one that would be most dramatically affected by this. Mm-hmm. And maybe FIFA would find a way to work that in some way or another.
That'd be interesting.
So, as we go in a little bit into stoppage time coming up here, there's news coming out that essentially, in a shock to no one at all, that Man City has figured out a way to utilize financial fair play system, just like PSG, to direct inject cash into their teams, circumventing the system and covering losses. So crazy, I know. But look, this goes back to having those people on the seats, right? Those four power brokers of the big clubs in the seats. You can utilize the laws of financial fair play to cover up, move things around, and know how to
creatively finance.
Exactly. And that's what you have, especially when the oil countries where you have like a sheik or something who runs the club, and essentially what you have is the owner is only allowed to do a certain amount of cash injection into the teams, right? What's happening is they can utilize sponsorships to help that process. Problem: if your team is ran by the Qatari government, and the Qatari government owns and runs everything in Qatar, essentially every sponsorship you have coming out of Qatar would be a direct cash injection into the club. So that's essentially what's happening, is the sheiks are finding ways of sending their money and laundering it through other companies to direct inject cash in there. Man City used this to wipe out a $9 million shortfall that they had when they fired Roberto Mancini. And PSG has been doing this for God knows what, for God knows who. It's all out there. We'll continue to cover this, but I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole. But it shows the leaks and it shows the issues with financial fair play as a whole. And even more reason why you're seeing these teams kick around this idea of a Super League. Because if you're a billionaire, and Brandon said it earlier on Twitter, why shouldn't you be able to put as much damn money as you want and go Brewster's Billions? And if for everyone out there under the age of 25, if you have not watched Brewster's
Use the
Billions,
Google.
you need to watch that movie. Essentially, Richard Pryor gets what, like $300 million he has to spend in 48 hours? Something like that.
I think it's 40, and then he gets another 300 if he spends it.
There we go. And he has to keep track of all the payments and everything. But it's a great movie, and it's a great metaphor for this whole thing. If a billionaire wants to do that and dump all their money into a team, shouldn't they be able to? I mean, I don't know. It's problematic at best, and it's idiotic at worst. But
it's tricky because they live in a different universe than Portsmouth and Wimbledon and the rest. And UEFA is looking at it for the whole and saying, well, we don't want what happened to Leeds to happen. So we're going to try to make you be financially responsible. And these mega clubs are like, I own the club. Why do I have to do that? Why should I do that? I want to spend what I want. That fuels the breakaway talk. It fuels the Super League talk. They're going to have to find a happy medium somewhere. UEFA will try to protect the leagues and try to protect their national federations as they should. These super clubs are going to try to protect themselves as they should. They live in a different universe than the rest of the clubs in their league.
Which is why they need their own Super League to play in.
And it's where I think it'll get there. Like when I say like I don't think it happens overnight, I don't think it happens by 2025. I think it happens, but I think it's going to happen with UEFA's blessing, with FIFA's blessing, and they're going to work towards it because it is the best situation. But you've got to, if you're UEFA and FIFA, you've got to look out for the whole, and you've got to look out for all the other clubs, and you've got to try to find that happy balance. And it will take time, but yeah, eventually these super clubs are only going to play the super clubs because there's no point in them playing anybody else and having to be restricted in what money they spend.
One correction to a point you made earlier, Jason, about the billionaire who buys the Know Nothing Club and raises it up from whatever.
Yes.
Silvio Berlusconi bought Serie C side Monza. So he's planning on it. That's the thing. Monza has done nothing, but Berlusconi used to run AC Milan. So
yeah,
he's the billionaire who's buying the Know Nothing Club. He's going to raise him up. That's his claim. It happens.
Yeah, it happens, but does it actually happen? That's the question. Like, okay, sure, he bought it, but are they going to be raised up? Are they going to end up doing anything? Or is he going to get bored when he realizes it's not as easy as you think? Like, does it actually have an impact on anything is the better way to put it on my end. I don't think it does.
Yeah. I mean, I can think of championship to Premier League promotion.
Oh yeah,
and
that's doable.
That's and then if you go into the most recent example of Kunvi Shai when he bought Leicester, and that's your 1 in a million shot there.
And what did they do since? They went back to where they were.
Yep.
I mean, what is RB Leipzig, Red Bull Salzburg? Those are prime examples. It's bigger, but it's not super club.
Well, my hope is that within the next year or so, and it's not going to obviously happen next year, but a guy can dream that we get that Super Champions League. I would like to see that. And we'll go from there on our gambles as far as what's going to happen next. But I'm just saying, I'm all about it, baby. Let's get it done. I want the regulators on line one. The SDH universe is calling for it. I want the regulators on line one from England and from Germany. I want the deals cut, the parachute payments enacted, and I want a league. I want Thunderdome of billionaires. And I want it like a James Bond movie where there's yachts and like stupid Italian custom sports cars lined up, cigars with like the big sunglasses, and it's like the old gladiatorial arenas. I want that, right? And if we can make that happen, guys, I think we have something that could capture the imaginations of the world.
You're going to pay, and if you had the opportunity to buy a ticket, would you go watch the Superliga finale?
Absolutely.
The Campeón de Campeones.
Yes. The King of King Cups. I would watch it. I would buy a plane ticket. Because it would be, you wouldn't have that ridiculous. I love the NFL season. I don't like the product necessarily. We'll get into that later, but I like the idea that it is the competition every week counts. Every week means something. So all I'm saying is I just think that kind of intensity, that World Cup type intensity where it's like, oh my God, if we lose, we'll be out. That means something. And that's something that's missing right now from club soccer in general. Because I can sit there and talk about, well, Juve did this weekend and Sassuolo did that. But outside of getting a team in the Champions League, which Milan has somehow magically worked its way into the top 4, that's great and all. But a loss here, a draw there, mid-season, it doesn't count for much. But toward the end of the season, it will. I would rather a league where every damn win or loss means something.
And I just wonder how many people like you would drop that coin for the Triple H Thunderdome, King of Kings. I wonder. I really do.
I think it's sustainable. The money's there, and there's no reason a team like
I think it turns into the Formula One of soccer, where if you're only of a certain financial demo that you will go and watch, that you will end up being able to watch that product. I think it turns into Formula One.
Well, the ticket prices will obviously have to be kept in line to an extent. But and I will say that in certain parts of the country or certain parts of the world, the day of the week that you do these games will mean something. There will have to be weekend games. There will have to be, if you do this, it will not just be like, okay, we're going to do it on Wednesday night and expect a packed house of like 50 to 60,000 people. This is not Atlanta. A lot of people won't turn out for the mid-table Champions League games. So you're going to have to make sure that you set it up in a way that makes it viable for everyone. But I want it. I want Thunderdome. Maybe I'm the bad guy for saying that, but big money a lot of times equals big time product.
And I will watch from the sidelines to see if it does in fact turn into the Formula One version of soccer over time, over the next decade or so.
All right. Well, we have gone about 8 minutes into stoppage time. I don't want to keep anyone from doing what you guys, because I know you guys are on like 57 different podcasts between the United States and Canada, thanks to the Barn Burner Group and the SDH Network and the reach that you guys have. So if you could, please, gentlemen, plug yourselves. Let the world know where you will be.
John.
That sounded kind of...
No, John. No.
John?
No.
Just clarifying.
Do you want me to say pimp yourself then?
Pimp yourself, gentlemen.
There you go.
John, pimp yourself.
I ain't nothing but a PIMP. You know that.
No, you're not. No, don't pimp yourself that way. That's
16 in the clip and 1 in the hole. John Nelson's about to make some bodies turn cold.
Attaboy. At OSG Nelson on the Twitters, John Freeman Nelson on Facebook, and it's Cute Sports Guy on the Instagram, because when the boss says that's what you are, that's what your handle is. Let's see, soccerdownhere.net for all of the news that's fit to print, and we've gotten some great historical stuff that's been put up on the site recently, and that's going to be part of a fantastic series that's going on. And what else do we have, Jason?
We got stuff. We got a show tomorrow that starts at 9:00. We've got 1v1s dropping on a fairly regular basis now. We expect some hot drops out of Mr. Alifi coming up very soon. We expect more of those.
Yeah, we were at the end of quarter at my company, and end of quarter means I get to keep my lights on, so we had to keep the lights on.
Mendelbaum Industries.
Yeah, it happens.
It happens. So
So, yes.
But-
And then tomorrow, Fido Irish Pub, Buckhead, Stoppage Time Live
Yes.
will be happening. You can come watch. You can watch on Facebook.com/929thegame as well. But if you come watch, you'll get to see Vera from Resurgence talk about the TIFOs that the 17s and the Hype Depot create. Maybe get some hints about the playoff TIFO. I'm intrigued about what this could be. And you'll also get to hear from Tony Annan, the Academy Director for Atlanta United. Really good guy. Good friend, and a guy who's had a lot of success here lately building an academy from scratch. So it'll be good to pick his brain a little bit and talk about that and talk about that progression of Atlanta United as an entire giant big club.
Well,
So there's stuff.
I love it. And Michael Ruiz says that he would buy a plane ticket to go to Europe to watch the Super Mega Thunderdome League. And Patrick Cox says
If that's what it's called, I'm in.
Yeah. Well, Patrick Cox says that I'm just wanting to live out my dream of being Master from Master Blaster on Thunderdome and walk around screaming, "Who runs Buttertown?" So, yes, Patrick, busted. I will probably be at Fido tomorrow night as well. I'm going to try to swing out there. And other than that, you can catch me either on a hot drop or next Monday for Soccer Over There. We appreciate you, as always, listening in on the SDH Network. I am Nick Leafy for John Nelson, Jason Longshore. Love you guys. We appreciate you guys. And mucha Euro Mega Soccer Thunderdome.
All the Lyra, yo.
A lot of Lyria, y'all.